2010, so it's been like 13 years at this point.
Welcome to my
we
channel.
Really wanted to make
Don't
sure
forget to subscribe, like, share. Enjoy my
great and
video.
familiar for people who love Alan Wake, who love Control, but also, give a perspective for new players who've never kind of played those games. So that's kind of where like the idea of kind of creating a new playable character came from. On top of that, at the end of the first game, Wake, disappears, goes into a kind of very dark place.
Spoilers, wow.
We kind of wanted to make sure that we could still represent, the Pacific Northwest, which we kind of consider a key part of the Alan Wake IP. Really wanted to kind of make sure that the forest, the primordial forest, are represented. So, it gives us a different perspective and kind of a different avenue to kind of get across some of the stuff which we think is important for this franchise.
They're both also two really unique characters. Alan's going to have his own perspective being embroiled in this for the amount of time that he's been in it, whereas Saga I think, provides really valuable, fresh, new perspective. She is a newcomer to the Bright Falls area, but she also sees things through the lens of being an FBI agent, and she has a unique set of skills. I'm hoping players are going to be really jazzed about that.
So what do we need to know about Saga, our new playable character?
Well, she is a newcomer to the Bright Falls area. I think she offers a really interesting, fresh perspective on this world. She is a seasoned FBI agent. She is known for cracking difficult cases. She's a profiler. She has an unorthodox kind of mind-place technique which allows her to withdraw into her own mental space. I think that's a really interesting mechanic for the player that they're going to enjoy. You can actually do that at the press of a button and you flip between. And in that space you can place your clues and you can profile key suspects. So she's just got a lot of interesting layers to her, and I hope players really enjoy getting to know her.
Was there any part of that decision to sort of consider the players who didn't play the original game? Because she sort of represents them being, not being as familiar with the situation as Alan is.
Yeah, I definitely agree. She's a great POV character for newcomers to the franchise. I think she's also a great POV character for people who are familiar with the franchise. I mean, it's been like 13 years, so it's nice to have fresh perspective. But also, she's a very fantastic foil for Alan. One of our core themes in this game is duality. Two worlds, what is true versus what is false, and two characters really plays into that, two perspectives.
And then how does it work? Does each character have their own campaign that you play through, or are you able to switch back and forth?
So yeah, it's important to note that we kind of create one story. It's not like we have two playable campaigns. There's like one cohesive experience. You kind of start the game with Saga. You kind of learn about all the happenings that kind of took place in the original game, investigating these ritualistic serial killings, and then we end up playing as Alan, and after that point, basically as a player, there's set points in the world where you can freely switch between those two characters, so you can play like all of Alan's side of the story if you want to, and then play Saga's, or you can play all of Saga's, or you could kind of mix and match and decide how you want to play yourself.
Both sides have a really unique tone to them as well, so it's kind of fun to allow players to have the freedom of choice. I don't know about you, but horror games stress me out a little bit, so bouncing between the two can be really useful. Not to say that Saga's side is a walk in the park by any means, but they're just very different vibes.
Is that an interesting challenge from a narrative design perspective?
Yes, I would say so. But I mean, it's a fun challenge, right? Like that's what we get up for. We designed the story in a way where it very much had this in mind, where we wanted the story to be nonlinear. We wanted the story to be something that was a unique experience, just depending on what order you chose to play in. But the way we achieved that was through a lot of iteration. Stand it up, play through it, see how it felt, try again. And I think it landed in a really nice place. I hope players agree.
I believe you're describing this as full survival horror, where maybe the original was maybe a little more action adventure.
Yeah.
What has changed this time around to make it more survival horror?
Yeah, I think that when we were reflecting back on Alan Wake 1, we created like I'd say horror story, but the kind of gameplay was more action focused, as you say, and it created a bit of dissonance between kind of like what we were trying to say from a narrative perspective, but then like what the player was actually experiencing. So one of the key reasons why we wanted to change the genre was to kind of bring those two parts of the experience together to create a more cohesive package. It allows us to slow the gameplay down. We have like more time in the environments. We can make them more claustrophobic. I think that at Remedy we kind of really like working on atmospheric games. Like a lot of our games are very atmospheric, and survival horror obviously is a large part of our experiences on the atmosphere. So yeah, we really wanted to kind of like make sure that those two parts were working well together.
Yeah, I'd say The previous game had a lot of wave-based combat, and I think, we've learned a lot in the last 13 years. It's important to be scared, but part of being scared is also worrying about, it's not necessarily facing an enemy, it's the anticipation of facing an enemy. And so that was definitely a thought when we were going through design.
As for the combat, from what we've seen, it looks like it'll be similar, or it'll feel familiar.
Yeah.
That's when we're using light to weaken your enemies, and then you can get your shots off.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that the concept of fight with light, which was kind of like a key USP of the first game, is important for the franchise. We wanted to maintain that. I think the only difference, or the biggest difference here, is that we kind of changed the pillar from fight with light to survive with light. So it's not just about how you can use light offensively. We also have what we call safe havens, which are kind of like pillars of light, which you can run into enemies who kind of lose their kind of awareness of you, so you can kind of use it as a respite. And then obviously we want to make sure that we are utilizing light in other ways. So we have obviously consumable objects like flares and flashbangs and other items like that. So yeah, kind of building on top of what we learned in the first game. I think one of the key things for us is that we wanted to make sure that pacing-wise, we were not just throwing loads and loads and loads of enemies at you. We wanted them to make them feel more meaningful, make the combat feel more desperate, make it more physical. We have a cool destruction tech from Control, which we're utilizing a lot. So. Yeah.
But also, strategy is so important too, and I think Survive with Light speaks to that, where it's the way that the havens work. They are a resource, and there are a lot of resources in the game that I think players are going to enjoy using.
Now, Remedy is well known for having cinematic influences behind the games. Is there a movie or two you would recommend people watch in anticipation of Alan Wake 2?
Homework.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like, at least for me personally, obviously in the first game we have a lot of influences from David Lynch. So I think that stuff is still present. We still have that kind of small town Americana vibes, quirky characters. But then layered on top of that, we wanted to kind of bring in this kind of FBI angle. So we were looking at a lot of things like True Detective, Fargo, those kind of pieces of media. And then from a horror perspective, at least for me personally, I'm very much into kind of Hereditary and Midsommar. More on the when you think about horror, we're kind of thinking about it from a drama perspective on the narrative side as well. How can we create interesting horror, not just through scares and kind of atmosphere, but also on the story level, how can we do that? And I think Ari Aster and some of the new modern horror directors very much in 10, so it's been 13 years at this point. We really wanted to make sure that we could create an experience that was obviously great and familiar for people who love Alan Wake, who love Control, but also, given a perspective for new players who've never kind of played those games. So that's kind of where the idea of kind of creating a new playable character came from. On top of that, at the end of the first game, Wake, disappears, goes into a kind of very dark place.